Okay, this is the third in our series of 5 homilies on the Trinity of God. The Trinity not being Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, but being the Creator God, Mind of God, and Love of God. And today we're going to talk about the Mind of God. One of the kind of central proofs for the existence of God is the very evident design of the reality that we see in creation. Surely none of this could exist without there being some exquisite source of wisdom that first thought of and then orchestrated the building of the world we inhabit. This is what the book of Genesis, the first parts of Genesis, are about. And it's certainly our own experience when we create something. When I started to plan this video, I first mapped out what is it I'm going to talk about. My mind has to form a construct of it, and now here I am doing what I thought I was going to do, or some close approximation of that. Hopefully, we'll see. All right, how could it be otherwise? It's got to be that the mind pre-exists the existence. How could it be otherwise? Well, it turns out it is otherwise. And as we have seen when we look at the nature of creation and how it is that God creates through emanation, not through ex nihilo creating something, that there is this drip, 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 this continual sort of unfolding of what is reality through the processes of evolution and emergence. Turns out that mind is itself an emergent property. Mind arises out of the interaction of elements within a system. So I want to tell you a story. Back in the late 80s, 86, 87, something like that, I had the great privilege of being invited to accompany John Michael McIntyre, who was at the time one of the road managers for the Grateful Dead. And the Grateful Dead were going to the Laguna Seca racetrack. One of the reasons to go there was to create the music video for A Touch of Grey, which was their most popular single release. There lots of great music, but they weren't really head of the charts until that happened. So I got to be there at Laguna Seca, and what they had done was there was a campground there, so the Deadheads had a place to stay, and they set up a big stage, and they created a concert. 3 days of opening by Ry Cooder, and then Bruce Hornsby and the Range, and then finally the Dead came on, and all of this happened during the day because there was no amphitheater there. There was just this field that the Deadheads gathered in and cheered, and then end of the day, sun's going down, crowd goes back to the campground, or many of them did, and then the crew got started setting up the filming of the video of A Touch of Grey, which is a very complicated sort of puppetry thing where the members of the band were played by various huge skeletal puppets. Well, late afternoon on one of those days, I just kind of headed out to the end of the field where the crowd had been. I had an all access pass, so I got to go out there, and I climbed up kind of on this hill that was out there and kind of looking out and seeing things. And down at the base of the hill, there were 2-3 dozen Deadheads who were dancing and clapping and stomping to the rhythm of Not Fade Away. And it's complicated. I would try to reconstruct it here. It's a complicated rhythm, but they were stomping and clapping to that rhythm and dancing. And I watched them dance in this mass that was down. I'm looking down on them, and I can see. And there were various movements that they would be doing, and they're all kind of mimicking each other's movement. And then something would shift, and they would be doing something else. And so they were very much paying attention to each other, and clapping and stomping and dancing in harmony. They were a single organism. And I began to wonder, how is it that this is happening? Who's in charge here? Who's calling the tune, as it were? Who's deciding what dance moves they're going to do next? And it didn't take me long, as I was wondering about that, to realize, no, these are deadheads. Nobody tells them what to do. They are organically producing this experience with and for each other. Nobody's in charge. The mind of the group is made up by the actions of each of the members of the group. Turns out this is far more the way reality is, or nature is, than what we normally think of as somebody, as an architect, designs something and then gets other people to build it. Several years ago, I was driving across southern Illinois, and across the fields of southern Illinois, it was about dusk, and there was this flock of birds that were flying in this very elaborate pattern, sort of these clouds of birds. They weren't going anywhere. They were sort of dancing with each other. And I later learned that this was called a murmuration, and these were probably starlings. You couldn't really tell what kind of birds there were. And you can go on YouTube and you can see some amazing videos of starlings in a murmuration. Another phenomenon like this is just ants in an anthill. They go about doing their thing, and they create, some anthills are incredible architectural marvels. They were able to create things, and who's in charge? Who tells them how to do that? Perhaps the most amazing are slime mold. If you ever see a slime mold walking through the woods, it's gonna look like somebody's dog threw up on a log someplace. It's this sort of mass of mush. But as it turns out, it's billions of little amoeba-like organisms, single cells, that aggregate at one point in their lifespan, and in the kind of natural world, when the conditions are just right, they all come together and they form this mass. And if you come back the next day, the mass will have moved. It doesn't have feet. It's just a slime. It's just moving as it's consuming this log. And at a certain point, there are many different kinds of slime mold. They will actually form fruiting bodies, and it was like, wait, how do they do this? They are independent, or semi-independent. I mean, at this point, they're acting in concert with each other. But when conditions are not prime for them being together, they will disaggregate, and poof, they're gone. They just sort of disappear into the woods and into the soil. Another example would be a soccer team. We in America are just kind of learning to love soccer, but for many people, it's sort of like, what's exciting about this game? Sometimes you can go a whole game and nobody ever scores. Well, it's not really about the score. I mean, it is, because you're going to determine who it is that won. There is an aim there. But watching the game is about watching the play. Some of the plays are set pieces. They've already figured out there's a series of things that they will do for perhaps like for a corner kick, maybe for a throw-in. But these set pieces are scripted somewhat. Most of the play, however, is totally organic. And the team that is able to be mindfully aware of each other one player can kick a ball to where another player is about to be, but kicks it before they become offsides, so that they get a running start on the other team and have a good scoring opportunity. So all of these, slime molds, ants, starlings, soccer teams, they construct the appearance of mind. Learned that scientists had studied slime molds for a long, long time, trying to figure out how do they decide what they're going to do? Which is the king of the slime molds? Turns out the queen in an ant colony is not actually in charge. She's a sex slave. She just makes new ants. Right? She's not telling anybody what to do. And the starlings, as they're flying in this murmuration, there's no head starling that's telling them to do this. What they're doing is they're all flying at the same speed, at the same distance from each other. There's something that they do when they get to the edge of the flock. There's something they do if they spot some kind of predator. But there are computer simulations that you can adjust the speed, the distance, the various things, and you can see how it is that these shapes emerge from the collective action of these elements within the system. And so the soccer team, the mind of the soccer team, is something that's formed by the fact that the soccer players know each other, they know what each other can do, they know where they're likely to be. And the more there is an experience on the part of the team of them being of one mind, the more successful they're going to be as a team. So maybe that's how the mind of God is constructed. Maybe the mind of God is an emergent property as well. And what is it that these systems have in common? Or to put it another way, what is necessary within a given system for that system to construct this emergent quality we call mind? Well, one of the properties is that the system has to care about the capacity of the elements within the system. That is to say, that each ant has to care about the well-being of the other ants. The starlings are looking out for each other. The players are aware of who's playing in which position. And they are playing in such a way that they increase the ability of the others to do their job. So everybody knows about and cares about the well-being of the others. So is this a community in which the capacity of the individuals within it is prized and supported? Second thing is they have to be able to communicate with each other. The ants communicate by pheromones. It's not entirely clear how slime molds communicate with each other, but the starlings can actually see each other. And the players on the pitch in the soccer team, they can call to each other. Although there's an interesting thing, I heard a story the other day about deaf soccer. And deaf players, so they don't have the advantage of sound. And in fact, any kind of instrument that they use, their hearing aids, they got to take them out because everyone is minimally capable of hearing, so that they're on a level playing field. They have, in that sense, the same capacity, but they're communicating in other ways. So how does the system communicate with itself? Is there a way for that communication to happen? The neurons in my brain, how do they communicate with each other? So there's the capacity of the elements within the system. There's the communication between the elements in the system. And there's a sense of all of the elements in the system caring about the common good of the system. Even, in some cases, being willing to sacrifice their own existence on behalf of the whole. And so when we have a system in which all the parts are prized, helped to grow to their greatest capacity, where there's as much open and clear, consistent communication between the elements in the system, and every part of the system knows that it's working for the well-being of the whole system, then what we have is an emergent property of mind. Perhaps this is what happens when we live as a part of community, where we care about each other, where we communicate with each other, where we act on each other's behalf. There is a shared sense of mind which we articulate as being the mind of God, and we experience it as though we're listening to what God is telling us to do, because we have constructed this image of God, and then we listen to what it is that we have constructed. If you want to know more about kind of how that happens, check out my piece about the transformation octave, because that's what we do, is we create a way of thinking about the problem, and then we listen to what that worldview has to say to us. And this is all a part of this sort of the ways that the things that we create us. This is what's Hofstadter referred to as a strange loop. So it is our capacity to do this that creates mind, creates the property of mind and the mind of God. What we construct or intuit as the mind of God shapes how we show up in our lives. It forms a worldview and a way of being in the world. And the worldview we inhabit forms the mind of God. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you again next week.